For more than 40 years, Reba McEntire was the queen of country music. She always smiled on stage, was super nice in interviews, and stayed loyal to the music business that made her famous. But behind all the sparkly dresses and bright lights, she was holding onto a lot of hurt feelings. In Nashville, people quietly talked about how Reba remembered everything. Every time someone was mean to her, every time someone betrayed her, every time people stayed silent when they should have helped her. And when the Grand Ole Opry had its big 100th birthday party, she finally let everyone know what was on her mind. One quiet sentence she said backstage would shake up country music's most important place. It happened on a night that was supposed to be about bringing everyone together, celebrating 100 years of country music history all in one place. The Opry's 100th anniversary party brought together old legends, new singers, and TV cameras from every big network. Reba showed up dressed like she was ready to celebrate, but people who saw her up close could tell something was different. She looked calm but also distant, like a woman who was getting ready not to sing a song, but to finally tell the truth. When a reporter asked her how it felt to come back for such a big moment, Reba smiled politely. Then she leaned in close and whispered, "You know what you did." She didn't say any names. She didn't explain anything. But those words were so heavy and serious that they made people stop talking mid-sentence. Within just a few hours, people who work in public relations were whispering to each other. Newspaper and TV reporters were calling their bosses, and people who work backstage were texting each other because they couldn't believe what they'd heard. Nashville runs on rumors and gossip. But this wasn't just gossip. It was a warning. People who have known Reba for the longest time say she doesn't speak without thinking first. She thinks very carefully about what she says, and sometimes she waits for years before saying something important. And that night, it seemed like she had finally run out of patience. For many, many years, she had been carrying 5 betrayals inside her heart. These were deep hurts that shaped her silence, and some people say they changed her whole career. The 2001 Country Music Association Awards were supposed to be one of the proudest nights of Reba McEntire's entire career. It was meant to celebrate everything she had worked so hard to build through many years of non-stop work, heartbreak, and success. The people in charge of the show had planned a special duet to honor all the amazing things she'd done for country music. It was like a symbolic way of passing the torch from one generation to the next. Reba was feeling super confident then. She was elegant, respected, and everyone admired her. The performance was meant to show that even after all these years, she could still own the stage better than anyone else. Practice sessions went really well. Her dress was custom, made just for her, a beautiful deep red gown that sparkled under the stage lights. The music arrangements were all finished, and her team got the schedule that confirmed when she would perform. Everyone was ready to go. Then just a few hours before the final practice run, her manager got a phone call. The duet was canceled. Without any warning, her name had been quietly taken off the list of performers. Instead of her, the show would now feature Vince Gill. At first, her team thought someone had made a mistake. But when the official list was handed out to everyone, the truth became clear. There was no explanation, no apology, just silence. The public heard that some creative changes had been made. The press release said there were scheduling conflicts, but people on the inside in Nashville understood that this wasn't really about timing or schedules. It was about politics and who had power. By that time, Vince Gill had become one of the most powerful and influential men in the Opry circle. His charm, his good reputation, and his friendships with people on the CMA board made him untouchable. If he wanted something to happen, very few people dared to say no to him. Reba didn't confront anyone or start a fight. That wasn't the kind of person she was. She performed her solo song as planned, smiled for all the cameras, and left the venue before the show even ended. People who saw her backstage later said she looked calm but distant, like someone who had just learned a really painful lesson about loyalty in a town that often rewarded staying quiet instead of being honest. On the inside, she was heartbroken. It wasn't just that she'd been replaced by someone else. It was who had replaced her that hurt so much. Vince wasn't a stranger to her. They had performed together countless times, done charity events together, and had late-night rehearsals together. She looked up to him, trusted him, and believed they stood for the same values and beliefs. When he stayed silent and didn't speak up while she was being excluded, it wasn't just a professional slight or mistake. It was personal. Friends say that night marked a small but permanent change in how Reba felt about the music industry. She stopped assuming that friendship automatically meant people would treat you fairly. She began to watch more carefully to see who spoke up for others and who didn't, especially when the politics and power games turned mean and cruel. Years later, when someone asked her about her lowest and worst moments, she didn't say any names, but she admitted, "There was a performance that never aired, one that broke something inside me." Fans thought she was talking about a lost concert or a TV special that got canceled. But people who knew the real story understood exactly what she meant. That night wasn't just about losing a chance to sing a song, it was about losing trust, the kind of trust that takes an entire lifetime to earn and only a single moment to completely destroy. If the Vince Gill incident was a silent betrayal, the one involving Travis Tritt was deliberate and on purpose. It was a wound that cut even deeper because it showed just how easily respect could be traded away for someone's ego. In the early 2000s, Nashville was buzzing with excitement over a huge collaborative project. It was meant to be a unifying anthem, a big celebration of country music's roots, power, and how long it had lasted. Every major big name in the genre was being considered for it, and when Reba McEntire's invitation came, it felt absolutely right. She had been the backbone of country music for so many years, the bridge between the classic old era and a new generation of younger artists. The song's concept was pretty simple: gather all the biggest voices to sing about pride, tradition, and being strong and lasting. Reba loved the idea. She recorded demo versions, cleared her whole schedule, and got ready to join the all-star recording session. But weeks later, when the official lineup was released and announced, her name was completely gone. According to multiple sources who were actually in the studio at the time, Travis Tritt had quietly voiced his objections and complaints. He reportedly told the producers that the song was meant to be a men's anthem, and that Reba's inclusion would make it less authentic or real. Some people said he was worried that her powerhouse presence and amazing voice would overshadow his own performance. Other people blamed old-school gatekeeping, which is the unspoken belief that certain songs, stages, and symbols of tradition belonged only to men. Whatever his reasoning was, his opinion carried a lot of weight. The producers listened to him, and Reba was erased from the project. She didn't find out from the record label or her own team. She found out from a friend who worked on the studio staff, who called to warn her before the news became public. For Reba, the sting wasn't just professional embarrassment. It was the quiet cruelty of realizing that someone she had supported publicly had worked behind the scenes in secret to keep her out. Still, she said nothing about it publicly. Months later, she agreed to perform at a Georgia charity concert that was organized largely by Tritt's management circle. It was supposed to be a night of goodwill and helping the community. Reba rehearsed her whole set, prepared her band, and even donated part of the money she would have earned back to the charity cause. Then, just a few days before the event was supposed to happen, her assistant received a short message from the organizers. Her performance had been canceled. No explanation, no offer of a replacement time slot, nothing at all. When reporters followed up to find out what happened, they were told her act no longer fit the tone of the evening. The wording was vague and unclear, deliberately so on purpose. But people close to Reba understood what it really meant. She'd been excluded and pushed out again. That was the exact moment when her patience hardened and turned into clarity and understanding. In Nashville, Reba had always been known for her diplomacy and tact. She avoided public feuds and fights, never spoke harshly or meanly about other people, and kept her focus on the music. But this time, her silence spoke volumes and said everything. When someone asked her about Trit in an interview several months later, she smiled and replied calmly, "We don't sing in the same key." To most regular people, it sounded like a clever one-liner or joke. But to people within the industry, it was like a quiet thunderclap or explosion. Reba wasn't talking about musical pitch or harmony. She was talking about principles and values, about the kind of men who closed doors and shut people out in the same rooms where they once shook her hand and pretended to be friendly. From that point forward, Reba began stepping away from projects that were dominated by male gatekeepers. She focused on her television work, starting her own record label and taking more and more control over her own career. She had learned that respect in Nashville wasn't always earned just by having talent. Sometimes it had to be reclaimed and taken back by walking away. That year marked a quiet transformation and change for Reba McEntire. She was no longer just the queen of country charm and sweetness. She was a woman who had seen too much to pretend that the system was fair anymore. And from that point forward, she played by her own rules. Before there was any rivalry or competition, there was friendship. In the 1980s and early 1990s, Reba McEntire and Tanya Tucker were seen as two women who were redefining what it meant to be strong in country music. They shared stages together, traded compliments in interviews, and defended each other in a business that often tried to pit women against one another. But that alliance and friendship didn't last. In the mid-1990s, Reba was in negotiations to co-host a televised Country Music Hall of Fame tribute. This was a prestigious and important event celebrating the pioneers and legends of the genre. Producers saw her as the natural and obvious choice. She was respected, eloquent and well-spoken, and already a symbol of country's golden era. Then, at the very last moment, everything changed. Tanya Tucker's team reportedly struck a deal behind the scenes in secret, offering producers exclusive access to tabloid interviews and backstage footage if Tanya could host the entire event alone by herself. The offer worked and convinced them. Reba was replaced without any warning. She didn't hear it from Tanya directly. She heard it from her own publicist. She was blindsided and shocked by new promotional materials that no longer included her name anywhere. The betrayal wasn't just professional or about work. It was deeply personal. Reba stayed composed and calm in public, but people close to her said she was crushed and devastated. The quiet distance that followed between them became permanent and forever. At red carpet events, the two women barely acknowledged each other or said hello. Industry insiders noticed what was happening. The camaraderie and friendship were completely gone. Years later, in 2014, the final fracture and break came. The Country Music Association organized a star-studded all-female tribute honoring the pioneers and early women of country music. Tanya Tucker led the performance and was in charge. Reba McEntire, one of the most influential and important women in the entire genre's history, wasn't even invited. When fans began asking questions online and on social media, Tanya posted a short dismissive message that seemed to brush it off. Not everyone gets an invite to the party. No names were mentioned specifically, but everyone knew who she was talking about. Reba said nothing publicly in response, but that silence spoke volumes and said everything that needed to be said. Friends say she never forgot what happened. Not the hosting betrayal, not the exclusion from the tribute, not the indifference and lack of care. In a world where reputation means everything, Tanya's actions had turned friendship into competition, and competition into quiet resentment and anger. By 2022, Reba McEntire had survived heartbreak, career shifts and changes, and loss. But nothing prepared her for the moment that should have been about healing and turned into another wound and hurt. When country legend Naomi Judd passed away and died, the music industry came together for a televised memorial service. Reba was invited to close the entire show with a final emotional performance. A song that was chosen specifically to honor both Naomi's legacy and Reba's personal connection to the Judd's family. She rehearsed very carefully, adjusted and changed her tour schedule to make it work, and approached the event with deep sincerity and seriousness. Naomi wasn't just a peer or colleague in the industry. She was a real friend. Then, just one single day before the memorial was supposed to happen, everything changed completely. Two Opry-affiliated board members intervened and stepped in to reshuffle the entire program. Reba's performance slot and time was cut down and made shorter. Her position in the lineup was moved forward and earlier, away from the finale at the end. There was no phone call, no explanation or reason given, only a revised and changed schedule that was emailed to her team. Both of these board members had history with Reba from before. One had previously clashed with her and had arguments over Opry scheduling decisions. The other, years earlier, had allegedly questioned her prominence on televised specials, reportedly calling her overfeatured and saying she was on too much. Reba showed up anyway and went to the memorial. She sang beautifully and amazingly, then left quietly without making a scene. No after-party, no interviews with reporters, no smiles for cameras, just silence. Weeks later, on a podcast interview, she was asked about the memorial service. Her answer was very brief and short. "That night broke my heart in more ways than one." She didn't elaborate or explain further. She didn't need to say more. For her fans and supporters, that moment became symbolic and meaningful. Reba's sadness wasn't about fame or getting airtime on TV. It was about respect, about losing the right to say goodbye to her friend on her own terms the way she wanted to. People close to her say that after Naomi's memorial, something deep inside Reba changed. She stopped pretending that staying silent was the same thing as being graceful. She began writing things down, not song lyrics, but actual memories and stories she'd kept locked away and hidden for many decades, getting ready to tell them when the time was finally right. And when she whispered, "You know what you did," at the Opry's 100th anniversary celebration, people who knew her best understood what was happening. This was the reckoning, the moment of truth and accountability. The fifth betrayal remains the one single thing she refuses to name or talk about specifically. People close to her say it involved a co-headlining tour in the early 2000s, a major big deal that was negotiated privately in secret. It was meant to bring together two of country's biggest stars to tour together. Reba had cleared her entire schedule, approved all the marketing materials and advertising, and began rehearsing and practicing. Then overnight, literally in one night, the project disappeared and vanished. Another artist took her place instead. The tour went ahead and happened without her. There was no phone call, no explanation or reason given, only silence once again. Some people point their fingers at Garth Brooks. Others whisper that it was Alan Jackson. A few people mention a powerful Opry board member who also managed and represented major acts at the time. Whoever it actually was, Reba's trust was completely shattered and broken. This wasn't just a lost tour or missed opportunity. It was a public humiliation that everyone could see. People around her say it marked the absolute end of her willingness to depend on other people in Nashville's inner circle. She became more independent and self-reliant, more cautious and careful, and in her own special way, more powerful. In her later interviews and unpublished memoir drafts that haven't been released yet, Reba began leaving clues and hints. She wrote paragraphs about a deal that was made in shadows and secrecy, or a promise that vanished and disappeared overnight. Fans online have picked apart and analyzed every single line, linking and connecting them to real events: the CMA Awards, the Hall of Fame Gala, the Judd Memorial Service. One passage really stands out and gets people's attention. She writes, "Sometimes the curtain falls not because the show is over, but because someone pulled it early and ended it too soon. She never says who did it, but maybe she doesn't need to say it. The people involved and responsible already know. Reba McEntire has spent her entire life mastering the art of restraint and holding back, smiling while other people took credit for her work, forgiving in public what she couldn't and wouldn't forgive in private. But now her silence carries more power and weight than any song she's ever sung in her career. Maybe she'll never name them and say who they are out loud. Maybe she doesn't have to do that. The truth is already echoing and bouncing through Nashville's walls, and everyone can hear it. Who do you think were the 5 Opry legends Reba was referring to and talking about? Leave your thoughts and ideas in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more untold stories from behind country music's brightest lights and biggest stars.